Caleb is a coalition of churches, nonprofits, labor unions, civic organizations that come together around common issues in order to build power for change. I mean, that's really the short of it.
Especially in action. I think, faith without works is dead. And then equality of seeing that everyone has a seat at the table. And then also love. Without love, we won't be able to do anything, or nothing will be fruitful of what we do. And then benevolence is the kindness. Just showing kindness in a mean world, I think speaks volume, as well as there are so many people that have it in their heart that they want to do something, but don't know how to do it, or where to do it, or how to get involved. And so right now, what Caleb is at the right moment is because we're just a reflection of allowing people to see that it can no longer happen on our watch. I think that the time of change is always now. There's never a period where we can wait for justice to come. We're going to have to make it come. I think that the time is right now because we have so many committed and dedicated people that have sacrificed their time to say, I want to be involved. Not just speak of what they want to do, but actually put their heart and their soul and their monies behind it. And I think that's what has helped us. When you have dedicated people, when you have committed people, when you have people that have found their passion, that's what has made the difference. We have been able to connect people that have found their passion. They have found their voice, and they are using it.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Those who have joined us via Zoom, those who are watching via Facebook Live, and those that are going to tune in later. Thank you all for being here. And a big thanks to the candidates that are joining us this evening for our second Caleb Economic Mobility Task Force Candidate Forum. So as a quick introduction, my name is Austin Sauerbrei. I'm the co-chair for Caleb's Economic Mobility Task Force. And this series of candidate forums is focused on a very particular issue. We're focused on accountability and transparency in city government, and accountability and transparency in how development happens in our city. So we're going to dive into these issues momentarily, but just to set the agenda, in just a second, we're going to give the candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we're going to show a very abbreviated version of our full presentation to let folks know a little bit about our specific campaign. And then we're going to dive into some questions and conversation with the candidates. So again, thanks folks for being here. And without further ado, we want to give each of the candidates that are on with us tonight 1 minute just to do a quick introduction, say who you are and why you're running for office. And so we'll go one by one. We'll start with Mr. Anderson. You want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Austin. And thank you guys for doing this. My name is DeAndre Anderson, born and raised here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I decided to step up and run for city council because I just feel like it's time for a candidate that's going to put the people over politics. It's time for our constituents' voices to be heard. I am in the Army National Guard. I am the AGM at Defy Chattanooga here out in Hamilton Place. And I'm excited to be here tonight and have a conversation with you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We'll go to Ms. Mott.
Hello, Austin, Helen, and all good people. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for hosting this as well. Of course, my name is Marie Mott. I'm born and raised in District 8, and I'm running for city council because I've been in the trenches with the people for years. I'm so proud of the work that we have done, particularly in East Chattanooga, to fight for Boone High Singer, Lincoln Park, historic preservation, the TIF district that we wanted to extend the boundary lines for around Boone Height, and the community benefits agreement. And so I'm running because we need change, and I don't feel like the incumbent has given us the change that we need. And so I'm stepping up like never before because I believe in the people, and the people have all the power, and we need to return power back into the hands of the people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Byrd.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for putting this presentation together in this forum. I'm Anthony Byrd. I'm the incumbent that's definitely trying to hold on to my seat and just continue to connect with everyone in my city. So often I meet so many people that say they don't have a voice at the table, and so many people that say they just want to be able to voice their opinions. And unfortunately, we can't always get to everybody every time, but we just try to keep an open door policy and have people to come in and just be able to say, hey, I have a seat at the table. So I want to continue to make that seat at the table and set the table so people can come and be comfortable and have open dialogue with each other. And that's me, Anthony Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. All right, Mr. Holman.
Good evening. Thank you for this forum. My name is Alan Holman. I'm a pastor. I've been pastoring for 44 years, 12 of which here in Chattanooga. I'm also a genealogist, and I want to maintain a safe, just, and compassionate environment for freedom. And I come to bring order to a chaotic situation.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. A reminder for folks, Mr. Holman is running for District 5. So candidates, we are so happy and so glad for each of you to be here today. So as I mentioned before, we're going to do a very quick abbreviated presentation. It'll be about 7 minutes long. The full presentation is 45 minutes. For folks that are listening, feel free to go to calebcha.org/develop-with-us for the full details. So without further ado, we're going to get started with that presentation.
Our values are what good development looks like, our living wages. No one should have to work more than one full-time job to provide for themselves or their family. Community stability. Investment should increase opportunity and quality of life for low and moderate income families. Every Chattanoogan deserves secure housing in a safe and thriving community. Our third value is equitable transit. When people have access to safe, affordable public transit, they're able to get to jobs, training, and education that provide pathways to economic sustainability.
And so what do we want? We want transparency and accountability. We want transparency and a community voice in decisions involving public money that will impact our neighborhoods. And we want accountability, community-centered metrics that ensure that companies who get public resources are actually benefiting our people. And what we want, good development. Good development happens with us and not to us.
The real focus of our Develop With Us campaign is on one factor that guides economic development here locally, and that is the tax breaks and incentives deals that are given as part of our recruitment of employers.
And every year, there are companies that receive tax breaks from our city. They're receiving public incentives to build their buildings and do business. And so we had some questions. What's the real magnitude of tax breaks in terms of real dollars? How do tax breaks work? Who decides which companies receive a tax break? How do we make sure that these decisions actually improve our health, wages, financial security, and life circumstances? And most importantly, where do you and I fit into that? So just last year, the amount of corporate property taxes that were forgiven or written off by the city of Chattanooga and Hamilton County totaled over $25 million. And typically these tax agreements last between 10 and 30 years.
That tax revenue, if it were collected, would be part of funding our local infrastructure, public safety, parks, libraries, neighborhood services. And when those essential public services come under strain, or when there is a lack of tax revenue, this is part of the reason why.
Not that tax incentive deals are necessarily bad. In fact, sometimes they're very needed, but we have questions about them. So it turns out with that $25 million that was given out in tax breaks last year, over 90% of these were given through a type of tax breaks called the jobs pilot. And typically these are used to help attract new development and new companies to the city.
pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. It's basically an agreement between the city and a company that provides the company with a tax break for getting here. So it's an incentivization deal to get businesses to develop here. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. They create, because we want development here, we want jobs here. But before we, start handing out jobs pilots, willy-nilly, we want to ask a few questions.
Do these tax breaks actually create real benefit for our communities? Is it worth what we would lose in property tax revenue? And would the company locate here anyway? Do they even need the incentive in the first place?
So I just want to talk a little bit about the current process for that and lay it out in a little comic. First, the city hires the Chamber of Commerce to recruit businesses to Chattanooga. From there, businesses will complete a jobs pilot application, and then the Chamber of Commerce reviews that application. So what about the public? Well, unfortunately, there are no publicly adopted criteria for jobs pilots and how those get put forward. And so there are no required public hearings and no staff report at this point. So very little public involvement. Next, the city's Industrial Development Board, also known as the IDB, conducts a final review of the pilot application. The IDB takes ownership of the land, equipment, buildings of the company, and then the company leases the assets from the IDB for a small amount. And so the big question we're asking here tonight, are these agreements benefiting our communities?
You've heard the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I don't know, how much this map is worth. Basically, we won't go into the detail on it, but what it shows, anything you see in a color is tax advantage, which is to say it doesn't pay property taxes the way you and I do. So in it, we're showing pilots, we're showing tax increment financing, and we're also showing government-owned properties, which are tax exempt. And I think what this map tells us is that we've got a lot of properties in the city of Chattanooga that are colored. And so they're not saying they're not paying their fair share. There's some good reasons why some of them are not. But you can see when you take those properties out of the mix that the burden falls to the rest of us, to small businesses, to homeowners and all like that. So also given the fact that, as we said earlier, that this represents about $25 million just in tax incentives, we need to be really careful before we add more color to this map. As we've said earlier, we're not against all tax incentives, but we believe we need to be strategic. We need to make sure that any incentive, and we're talking specifically here about jobs pilots, that there is significant public benefit in terms of the number of jobs, the investment, but also the wages of these jobs. And also we need to make sure that the but-for test is met. The but-for test means without the incentive, we wouldn't be here. We feel like that some of the pilots that we've given in the past, the company likely would have located regardless. It was more the sort of the icing on the cake, and the cake was already baked. So we need to be really careful. We need to be strategic, we believe, in the future.
Right.
Arranging these pilots is
So thank y'all so much. That's just again a snippet of the longer presentation, but that gives you an idea of some of the issues that we've been grappling with recently. So to begin, the way that the conversation is going to work, just to lay some ground rules, we're going to have some prompt questions from our members. And for each of the prompt questions, each candidate will get up to 2 minutes to respond. And I'll cue y'all to let you know which candidate is up to speak. And you'll have up to 2 minutes for your initial response. After that, we'll have some follow-up discussion. And we're going to do our best with the follow-up responses, try to keep those under a minute. And, you know, if I interrupt you, it's not because I'm trying to cut you off. It's that we are trying to keep to time. So with that, we're going to go ahead and dive in with our first question. Oh, I'm sorry. One more note for folks that are watching. If you do have particular questions, please either post them in the Zoom, or if you're on Facebook Live, post them in the comments. And if we have time, we'll try to get to some of those. So our first question is from Miss Janice Walwyn.
Good evening to each of you. We're so glad you're here. My question is, as we've researched and talked to a variety of stakeholders about our current processes for granting tax incentives, we were surprised by the lack of information provided to both the public and to key decision makers. I have two questions regarding that. Were there specific items in our Develop With Us presentation that you were surprised to learn? And then the second question is, were there aspects of the process that you would like to change?
All right. And to begin, we're going to start with Mr. Holman.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. One of the concerns that I have about that, I was surprised to know that so many people in the public were not aware. They were not aware of the development of, especially in their area. They're not aware of a lot of things. And one of the things I'm concerned about, I've even noticed when zoning and planning post a sign saying there's going to be a public meeting because they want to change the zoning or something like that, that's pretty much after the fact. It seems like the public should know what the plans are way down the road before all of that takes place. And there needs to be some kind of collaboration with all of the networking in our society to make sure that the public knows. Like we have our faith community, we have our unions, we have the fraternal organizations, we have the Board of Education and the Chamber of Commerce, and there needs to be some credibility, accountability with the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, the people in the neighborhoods need to know what's coming to their neighborhood and what's available for them. Even the neighborhood associations. Everybody don't belong to a neighborhood association. Everybody don't belong to an organization. Everybody don't read the newspaper. So it's the responsibility of the elected officials to make sure that their constituents are aware of what's coming down the pipe.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. All right, we're going to go to Mr. Byrd next.
Great question. You know, in District 8, we have 20,000 people. And Mr. Holman, he said it very elegantly. Everyone doesn't read the paper. Everyone's not a part of a civic organization. And a lot of times out of that 20,000 people, a lot of people have just given up on government because of the perception and so many of the things to say that government is not for the people or government, you know, you can't trust us. And that perception tends to carry a lot of weight. And a lot of times council people, mayoral people, other people find themselves defending or trying to break the ice to let people know that you can trust us. We can sit down and have a conversation. I've had several conversations with several of you here numerous of times, and it's just hard to sometimes reach everyone all the time. And sometimes the loudest voices in the room feel that they can project the determination of how something is supposed to go. But we have those private conversations sometimes, not through council, but private conversations through individuals that don't want to get on Zoom calls or forums and get bullied. And so they call us and talk to us. And a lot of people like the process. Is it perfect? No. But when we try to process, it shows us how to fix the process. And I think if we can get more people trying the process and we can say the process failed us this way, then that's how we fix it. But if we just throw money at things and don't know what really direction we're going in, the process will never be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. All right, we'll go to Ms. Mott next.
Thank you, Austin. That is an excellent question. So no, I'm not shocked at anything that I have heard because I've been following Ms. Helen for years now and been working with the Unity Group for years now. The things that I would change about the process to open it up, I think we need to include the community from the very beginning. We need to have an understanding of basically what is required for a pilot. Are we setting a criteria for the types of pilots that we want in our communities and holding them to a strict standard. Of course, I think that we should include community benefits agreements. So we have a contractual agreement for wages, pay per hour, and that residents for jobs, pilots specifically, get first priority for those jobs. I think we need to have a conversation about the process on setting a cap as far as the maximum a pilot should exist, and that should cap at 10 years. I think every person that receives a pilot should be paying school taxes and stormwater fees. Of course, as Helen talked about before, we need to do a but-for test. We have given out way too many pilots, and though they're not inherently bad, we shouldn't just give them out like candy. We should explain to the public, as well as those who participate in trying to get a pilot, ineligible projects. And so I just think that the process needs to be opened up as far as education to the public, even to elected officials, but we need to set some guidelines on how we're going to give out pilots, how we're going to scrutinize pilots, and then ensure how the pilots are going to benefit the community from the very beginning.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mott. All right, we're going to go to Mr. Anderson.
I would love to have something more formal in place to allow our constituents to have a place to give their input. I think that was one of the things for me that I was most shocked by. In addition to making it more accessible to give input, I vow to actively continue to seek out input from my community as well. And it is shocking to me to see that we're spending public dollars and we're not getting their input in on that. I think a solution for that would be to require our industrial boards to have some kind of system in place to be able to hold them accountable for sharing information to the public before signing off on anything, and before they are not, because sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. Before they sign off on anything, just making sure that they have heard from the constituents and they're hearing from the public. And I do agree. I definitely think that from the start, we have to present this to the public so we can be informed of what's going on and see if that's going to really benefit our constituents.
As a follow-up, thank you all for those. Those are all good answers. As a follow-up to that, though, how would you specifically include and engage your constituents in this situation?
Is that for me?
So we'll open this up for the follow-up. If there's anyone that wants to jump in, feel free, and try to stick under a minute for these follow-up questions.
Well, I guess I'll respond first. My initial response, I had talked about the different organizations, like the faith community. You have the Clergy Koinonia, Servant Leadership, and Kingdom Partners. You have their neighborhood associations. You have the fraternal organizations. You have UTC in Chat State. You have the Board of Education, the Chamber of Commerce, and the labor unions. After connecting with all of these groups of people, it takes, we ought to have a database. Every council person ought to have a database of their constituents and communicate with their constituents, because everybody does not have Wi-Fi or is accessible to social media. So we need to work out something, even if we have to do snail mail. That's an investment that will really pay off good dividends if we make sure that the community knows.
I'll go on ahead and jump in here next. So I would do exactly what we did with the Boone High Singer site. I would canvass with community members, because that is the most effective way of reaching people overall, even especially right now during COVID-19. We have to knock on people's doors. We just need to do that very safely with masks, but we need to talk to people directly. And then we need to have a collaboration and coalition in the community. So whether that is churches, labor unions, whether that is, I know we brought folks from Nashville to help us with the community benefits agreement, making sure that the institutions that are in our community, like Hope for the Inner City was at the table, bringing everybody, neighborhood associations to the table along with community constituents, and then setting up a steering committee that is voted on from members in the community, because the main objective, especially with the community benefits agreement, is for the council person to be neutral and to support what the community demands. And so it's about the people. And so I would just continue to do what we've already done in East Chattanooga, but as as the next person for District 8, I would be neutral and support what the community demands.
I would say public forums, neighborhood association meetings, making sure that we're going out and we're reaching our whole community and making sure that everyone's voices are being represented at the table. I think that's one of the first things. Partnering with community leaders, partnering with other people that have a scope of what's going on within their communities, so you can be in tune with what's going on. And I also think that we have to educate our community, teach them what we can and cannot do as a city council, so they are informed of what's going on throughout these processes. And partnering with our grassroots organizations, so like the Equity Alliance, CCJ, going to where our constituents are. We have to, as a representative, we have to meet them where they are. And I think that that's a good first step.
And once again, touching 20,000 people, you know, this, when you have one small group that has a very loud voice, that group doesn't speak for everyone. And then even when you have that small group that says they touched people, you know, as a leader, I found myself saying, let me go knock on doors and see how people been touched. And when I touch people, knocked on doors, people said, no, I haven't been touched. And I'm pretty sure you can knock on the door, you can ask people, have I touched them? And they'll say no. But then I think what creates more division is when the leader and the community or the groups start to bicker and fuss and argue, then we get nothing done. But when we go to that community and say, hey, we want to encourage you to come, when they trust the faith leader, when they trust the organization, when they trust the neighborhood association, but then when we bring people in a peaceful manner, then we can get something done. And I found I was able to do that tremendously well by bringing people together and just trying to calm the situation down, because a lot of times people felt they didn't get touched, and then others felt they did get touched. And we'll have an argument or a conversation so long and never get to a common goal to whether we want streetscaping, or if we want Bradford pear trees, or if we want roads to be extended, or if we want a daycare. And you know, some of these things just never go to be answered because we're instead of talking about things that don't sometimes matter. And the thing that mostly matters all the time is, how do we do the best thing for the community and touch everyone? And I think the way we're going to do that is by bringing more people together and more organizations together in a peaceful manner.
Well, very, very much appreciate that. And I want to start with a follow-up. We'll start back with Mr. Byrd, but then for others as well. I think Mr. Byrd raised a really very valid point that there's, in a given district, there's 15, 20,000 people, and it's literally impossible to knock on every door, even if you had an army of volunteers. And so with that challenge, knowing that, and knowing that the good work that council members do, try as best they can to have individual conversations with folks, what are some, zoning in on that, what are some real ways that as a candidate you would work to systematize that so there's actually some form of real representation and some way to say we had X number of people give this answer? What are some of the ways that we could systematize and structure that so we can start to move towards some sort of semblance of community voice? And we'll start with Mr. Byrd and then others if y'all want to jump in.
Thank you for that question, Austin. We have to change the mindset. I'm not your enemy. You're not my enemy. It's about helping people. That's what we're all here for. We got to change the mindset. We're not Washington, D.C. We're not here to beat each other up. And so a lot of people tend to turn away from these types of forums. A lot of people tend to turn away from these types of groups because they're sick and tired of it. So what I try to do is find people that are calm-mannered, calm-spoken, to try to come in, people that people can relate to and understand that we just want to hear you. We just want to talk to you. So once you start trying to change that mindset, then you can start to build those relationships up and you can create stronger communities. Our neighborhood associations right now are tremendously thin because people don't participate. But One thing I tried to do was with the Nippon Paint Company was get the neighborhood association president to be the head because he was over that community, and then bring other people that would anchor that community. And I accepted the call from other people, and I stepped back to say, let other people talk. But once that confusion starts to happen, you got to have a leader to come in to calm things down, to say, let's get to a common goal. But I think Ms. Charlotte said it in your video, love is the answer. When you go into these meetings, we have to show love and show that nobody's here to get a check. Nobody's here to try to get a job. In this room, we're trying to help and get people to jobs. And I think that's going to be the way, through love and letting people understand we're trying to get you a job and trying to get you to a better situation. So that's it.
If anyone else wants to respond.
I think it's also, yes, I do agree a little bit with what Byrd was saying. I do think that it also is us showing them that we are approachable and that their voices do matter. And I think once that they start to see that the people who are using their voices and speaking out, once they start seeing things getting done, I think a lot more people will feel more comfortable and feel more motivated to actually give in and buy in. And I think that's what we have this opportunity to do with this next leadership. And if I'm elected for the District 8C, I vow to continue to ask clarifying questions, get them involved, make sure that they know that their voices matter. And I think that we have to kind of change that culture and let them know that we're here for them, but we have to have representatives that shows that with their actions, not just their words.
Right, Ms. Mott or Mr. Holman?
The thing that I would continue to do again is, yes, canvassing cannot reach everyone, but we have radio stations, and we have Dr. Evelina Holmes has a email blast, so does CCJ, so does Tennessee United. So we have these various different networks that can communicate with their members, the SEIU, the Labor Council. So tapping into these email blasts so people can get that, and then connecting people to social media. And then of course, because COVID-19 is the new normal, having meetings even in a virtual setting. I think we need to diversify the options for people to be able to consume not only educational information, but give input. But I think one of the most beneficial things that we did when we did canvass for East Chattanooga was we had data sets and data points, not only of the doors that we touched and the people that we touched, but we had data points of what did people specifically want. And then that was broken down into pie charts and graphs. So then we can keep track of community input. I think we also need to have someone who is going to keep track of data sets, as well as a dedicated person in the community that's going to do memo notes and keep notes from meetings of what was previously discussed, and keeping track of goals and agendas as we go along the process.
Appreciate that. Mr. Holman?
Well, I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. The other candidates have made some very, very good points. I'm going to go back to what I was saying about the organizations. Most of the organizations, if not all, are meeting in some type of way. They're either meeting on the telephone, or they're meeting on the internet, or they're meeting in person in some places. Contact them to communicate with them as you would when you're campaigning. We're finding a way to reach the people now to get their vote. And what really irritated me as a pastor, that candidates will come to my church to want to speak to my folk. And then after the election's over, you don't hear from them anymore. And then some of them act like they don't know you when they see you out in the street. So we have to develop, and one of my things is I've developed relationships, we can develop stronger communities. So that's where we are. Contact the leadership in all of those organizations, find out when they're meeting, tell them you want to address them, not to get their vote, but you want to address them to assist them.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And these themes of contact and engagement with community, we want to continue this conversation, but we are going to move on to our next prompt question. And that's going to come from Ms. Helen.
Hello, candidates. Thank you for being with us tonight. Here's your second question. Currently, Chattanooga functions under a strong mayor form of government, with the mayor providing primary direction and the city council providing advice and final consent for plans put forward by the mayor's office. how would you interact and work with the mayor to help ensure that your constituents' voices are being represented and acted upon?
All right, thank you. And for this one, we're going to start with Mr. Anderson.
Absolutely. So I would schedule meetings with the mayor bi-weekly to advocate for my community and express any concerns that they might have. Also, making the relationship with the council and the mayor more collaborative, making it more of a in tune sync thing with each other. We have to make sure as a council we're holding our mayor accountable and making sure that we're getting information in a timely manner to be able to advocate. So we know when we're going to vote, we know how we're voting. We're voting with all this information, knowing if it's going to help our constituents or not. So I definitely think meeting and being able to advocate with the mayor, and I think once he is in tune with what's going on at the council level, we will be able to make a lot of progress together, especially right now and where we are. I think we have to work on unifying our relationships with the council and the mayor so we can see the potential. We can reach that potential that we have in our city.
Thank you for that. All right, next we're going to go to Ms. Mott.
Thank you so much. So I would have to say pretty much the same thing. There needs to be consistent meetings, not only with just myself if I was the District 8 council person, but with all council persons concerning issues such as development and pilots. We need to have consistent meetings with the mayor. We need to also have consistent meetings with the mayor's chief of staff. And so to have follow-up from a meeting with the mayor, to follow up, because sometimes the mayor's not always going to be available for a meeting, but there should be a good relationship also with the chief of staff for the mayor's office. And so I would be interested in having consistency, because I've seen in my experience as a community activist in 1:30 meetings when they had them, there was not a lot of congruency between the mayor's office and the city council. And I will advocate on behalf of our council that there were so many times where decisions were made on the mayor's side that they had no clue of. And so I would like to see more information shared, as well as just collaboration, because we all are responsible for taking care of our constituents here in the city of Chattanooga.
Thank you for that. All right, next we're going to go to Mr. Byrd.
Yes, and it's kind of funny because that's what we do. We have these meetings. We talk to this mayor, and I plan on continue to talking to the mayor. You have to be able to reach across the aisle. You have to have Republican friends. You have to have Democratic friends. You have to have Democratic Socialist friends. You have to have so many different people that you have to be able to touch, because the world is a melting pot. And to hear the conversation and the questions, these things happen. We have several meetings. When I first got elected, the mayor asked me what are my 3 top priorities. And 3 of my top priorities were to create a senior tax freeze, to make sure that we get the center built and finished and completed, to make sure that we get the funding and get Lincoln Park done. And the mayor said, hey, we're going to get these things done. And I got to say, he honestly gave his best efforts, just like with these pilots. The wording that you can use is they will use best efforts to hire people. What does best efforts look like? That's kind of wide open. The mayor, these companies, everyone have egos. And when you sit down at the table and talking to these massive egos and these people that are demanding things and trying to get things done, sometimes you have to be able to negotiate and work with them. And I think I've done a great job at working with the mayor and getting things done for my district. I've had more development and more things happen in my district than most of the districts in Chattanooga. And so I pride myself on just being able to work and communicate with the people in District 8 and the people when it comes to the mayor's staff. But at the end of the day, that strong mayor, weak council has to change, because just the sound of it creates an egoic conversation where I feel like I'm the man and I'm telling you all what to do. And the mayor has little things he can dangle in front of other council members and make them vote a whole total different way than you thought it was going to vote, because it still takes 5 votes to get anything done. One council person can't do it by themselves. There you go.
Thank you for that. Well, we do have a follow-up to that, kind of touching on the thing that y'all were hitting on. We know that city council members are expected to do the work of representing their district while also working a full-time job, putting food on the table for their families. And we know oftentimes council members are expected to be the experts in everything, and you can't be an expert in everything. But that said, the question for y'all is if you get elected, or for Mr. Byrd, if you get reelected, what are some concrete forms of additional independent support that you would expect the mayor to provide council members to help ensure that you actually do have the information you need and the resources you need to be able to make informed decisions? What are some of those concrete things that you would expect? And anyone who would like to take that is welcome to.
One of the things I would like to fight for is to see that we get our own attorney. We need our own attorney. I think we also need our own auditor. And I think those two things, Stan Sewell is a great guy. I have nothing bad to say about Stan. And I have nothing bad to say about Phil Noblett. But it's kind of hard when you're dealing with them and Andy Burke's name's on a check. You know, it's the mayor, still that strong mayor, weak council situation. And it's just my own perception, what could be wrong, that, you know, they would lean toward the mayor's understanding more than ours. So I would like to see those things. I would like to see us have the county commissioners have a fund of, they had a fund of $100,000 that they could spend in their communities. I would love to see where each council member had $100,000 that was dedicated solely to each district. The council people that's on that council right now, they are some wonderful people. I love each and every one of them, and they do work hard for their individual districts. But I think we need to definitely have financings, you know, targeted toward those, toward our each district, and we need to have our own city attorney and our own auditor. I think that will help take things to a whole nother level. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Real quick, before we move on to this round robin, I want to apologize. I accidentally missed Mr. Holman for the 2-minute answer to the prior question. So to rephrase the prior question, how would you interact or work with the mayor to help ensure that your constituents' voices are being acted and represented? And I want to make sure you get your 2 minutes for that, Mr. Holman.
Well, this is a great time because right now we're looking at 15 to 16 candidates for mayor. And we opportunity to see what they're bringing to the table, what they're promising that they can try to get done. And we can look at their personalities as well as they look at us. And I'm also listening to all of the candidates for city council on every district to see with whom I may be working. And we have to develop a relationship. The council, first of all, has to come together. And then if we are together, if the 9 of us are together, then we can call the mayor to the table and say, look, this is what our constituents want. We're supposed to be your cabinet. We're supposed to be the liaison between you and the people. And if you want to get reelected, then we need to listen to the people. And we make sure we have that type of collaboration. That's where I would go with that.
Appreciate that. That's very, very helpful. Well, and now, so jumping back to our follow-up question about what resources you would need as a city council person, what you expect from the mayor. Again, whoever would like to answer that next.
I think I would like to have regular updates about what is going on in the city with the city funded services and how can we keep everyone accountable and knowing what's going on with that money that has been spent on all levels. And I think it's important that we know what's going on before it becomes a problem so that we can support one another and keep the community informed with what's going on. I think we need to start moving to be more proactive instead of reactive. And I think that that's a good first step, along with what Mr. Holman has said as well. I think that he's right. We have to be unified ourselves before we ask the mayor to do something if we're not even on the same page.
All right, Ms. Mott or Mr. Holman for that one.
Yes, so I would have to go along actually with Mr. Byrd. The council does need its own auditor and city attorney. I don't think the council will probably ever be unified with the lack of transparency and information, as well as adequate staff. I think the city council needs a little bit more staff to be able to answer questions, take notes, and correspond between what's happening within the legislative and the executive branch within our government. And I would agree with Mr. Holman. I think once we have the adequate resources, then yes, we have the responsibility as a council. I don't think we should continue to have this council person has a meeting with the mayor about this council person has a meeting with the mayor about this. I think we need mayor, even if it's not all 9 of us, if it's 5 of us, if it's 6 of us as a majority approaching the mayor, because there are so many issues that overlap in our districts. There's absolutely no reason why it should be parceled out meetings. I think we need to do that in unison and show a unified front from the council, because we are taking care of the constituents in our communities.
Mr. Holman?
Well, I would say that the mayor should be like excuse my language, like a pastor to the city, and have compassion for every parishioner that is under his or her watch, and to make sure that their relationships within the city hall, whether it be the staff, whether it be the mayor themselves, or whether it be the council persons, everyone is held accountable and abide by the Constitution, abide by the statutes, abide by the will of the people. There needs to be accountability as well as transparency.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Well, we have a question coming in. Let's see here real quick. Well, so here's a question that came in from Facebook Live that we can just jump to and insert here. It says, are cost benefit analysis ever conducted for local TIFs and pilots? And for candidates, how do you think you would approach a cost benefit analysis for these projects and these incentive deals? What information would you want and how would you approach it? And anyone is open to answer. And I can try to rephrase a little bit. So I think the question is trying to get at, so if we have these tax incentive deals that are going through the process that's currently in place, what is some of the information that you really would want to see before you're casting a vote, before you're making a decision? And Mr. Byrd can speak from his position, having gone through that. But for others, what are some of the concrete items that you would want to see before you actually take something to a vote?
When I first became a council person, Ms. Helen Burnshop, she used to always come down there and say, Councilman, clawbacks. You know, and I used to be like, clawbacks, and you know, she educated me a lot on that to make sure that, you know, I would bring up the question, you know, what would be the reason for clawing this back? What would be the, you know, the things when these incentives come up, how will we assure that, you know, certain monies don't get, you know, wiped away or don't get recouped? And, you know, one of the things that, you know, was said that, you know, we don't get, you know, our school money. That's not true. All pilots have to pay their school tax. That's hands down over the top. And then 90% of the pilots have to pay the taxes that the property is already in at that point. So if a property is already in that space of making, say, paying $20,000 a year in taxes, it will stay there and it would have to pay that $20,000 plus the school taxes. But after the development, that property may go up to $70,000 or $80,000, then they don't have to pay that extra. So I like those things, but then I look at how many jobs will be created and how can you show me the number of jobs that were brought to the city and the people that you hired. We did that with M&M Industries, and they met their quota across the board. And they also met their investment quota across the board. But unfortunately, a lot of the young people that was getting those jobs, they quit after 30 days or 40 days because the job was too strenuous for them, or they just didn't want to follow the rules in some instances. So I think that's when the churches, civic organizations come in again to change the mindset of the young people to understand what a job is. The wages, the companies that I have dealt with during my time have done and met the points of quotas that they were supposed to meet. And some of them superseded it. So I will continue to see those things happen, but have those clawbacks like we have now. When they don't meet those, we can then make them pay the taxes that they owe us at that time.
Right, others? And if folks don't have a response for this one, it's okay. We have other questions as well.
So again, I just want to make a slight correction. Yes, all entities do pay school taxes, but one of the things that happened with Volkswagen was they were allowed to deduct their stormwater fees from the school taxes. So I would want to make sure that each one would not only have to pay the school taxes, but the stormwater fees as well. Again, we need to make sure we're doing a but-for test, making sure that, again, we're just not handing out pilots to people just because they ask for one. And I think that that needs to happen from an independent party from the Chamber of Commerce or from the city or the county. I think we need to have targeted hiring requirements. Of course, what Councilman Byrd is talking about, clawback language, it must have citizen input. I do not think we should give out any pilot if we do not require citizen input from the very beginning. It needs to come with transparency and ensure that as city council persons, as the mayor is concerned, that we are being open and honest about the process and where we're at in the process. I think we also, again, as I brought up before, limiting and putting a cap on the duration of a pilot. So it's so many different things that we can do, but those are just some of the things that I have in mind, along with a guaranteed minimum wage.
Yeah, so, and I also think that we have to make sure we're just looking at how beneficial this would be for our community. That's something I think I would look at. What is my community saying about that? Is this going to help my community? I think it's just, again, that public input, making sure that what our community are wanting is what they're getting. And if we can help them in that process, I think that's what I would look at when it comes to that.
Mr. Holman?
I would like to talk about the hiring practices as well. I think they should be able to offer an apprenticeship program or on-the-job training for those who don't have the training or the skills or the education, and to help them on the ground level.
Appreciate that. Well, so we have one more prompt question that we're going to get to, but real quick, I want to do a lightning round in here. So this is going to be, we just want a super quick answer. When we're talking about public incentives to bring jobs to Chattanooga, for each of you, what do you consider to be a living wage? What would be the bare minimum wage that
$17 an hour.
$17 an hour?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have an exact figure, what metric should we use? And we need lightning answers. So we have $17 an hour. Ms. Mott, Mr. Anderson?
$16 an hour.
Okay, Mr. Holman?
I think I'll jump up a little higher. I'll tell you why. The statistics say that it takes $22.63 for a single parent to live, and $24.18 for a family of 3 or more. And if you look at the wages now, the mother cannot pay rent, buy groceries, do laundry, have transportation, pay for daycare, and so on and so forth. That's almost impossible. I'd like to see some of these elected officials in Washington try that.
Appreciate that. No, appreciate that. All right, Mr. Byrd.
Thanks, Austin. I like to see $100 an hour. Quit playing. Come on. I mean, we need to get money, but you got to look at checks and balances and how companies work and how things start. If you start everybody off at $20 or $15 or $17, you have no growth. And companies, it's a capitalist world that we live in. And so until we get things fixed in Washington, it's going to be truly hard at a city council level to determine some of those things. But one thing that this council has done, made sure that wages, when these pilots come in, are starting off at $13 to $15 an hour.
So $13 to $15 an hour for publicly incentivized projects. That's helpful. Okay, so now we're going to go into our last question. So this one is about economic planning. And so this question says, as pointed to in the presentation, we really do need a more comprehensive economic plan and economic vision for the city. Are you willing to initiate a broad-based economic planning process that would include the diverse interests and voices of the community? And what steps would you take to begin that process of developing a larger economic vision and plan for the city? And for this one, we're going to start with Mr. Holman.
I'm sorry, you may have to run that question by me.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so I'll repeat it. So the question is, We're in dire need of a broader economic vision and long-term economic plan. So as a council member, what are some of the things that you would do to start the visioning and the process of developing a long-term economic plan with the city?
I would say, first of all, once we get the hiring broader, if we hire more people, if we get more jobs, for our residents, that will build up the financial base of the city. I can only say focusing on more jobs.
And then we'll go to Mr. Anderson.
I believe the first thing we have to do is address how equitable our city is to all of our constituents. We have to be able to have a diverse options for our diverse group of people. How are we creating the budget and making economic development without all of our citizens' voices? Our Black and Brown communities suffer the most, but have very few opportunities to voice that. So I think we have to have more involvement that is meeting our constituents and helping them be able to have a say and to help them grow with our economic growth. So making sure that they're getting paid livable wages, making sure that our transportation is equitable, and making sure that our community is sustainable. And I think that's one of the things that I would say for that answer to help us grow and move forward.
All right. Ms. Mott?
Yes, I would also have to say that we need to, I think for anybody who's been paying attention to any of the information that's come out of COA or Professor Ken Chilton, we know a lot of what the problems are. I think what we need to start focusing on are the solutions. So what are the conversations that we're having around job training and job opportunity for individuals who are disabled, individuals of color? What are the conversations that we're having around what is our retention rate for the city of Chattanooga for certain jobs? What does career advancement options look like per job or per career choice? I think there is also this conversation that we must have about education. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to move forward as a citizenry if we do not increase either the technical education of the citizenry or the parochial education of the citizenry. So having a creative partnership with the county on how we can invest into public education, even for transitioning adults, is very, very critical on how we're going to bring our people up to better wages. And then finally, I think one of the things that we desperately need, in particular, is the African American Chamber of Commerce. We do not have a chamber that represents the business interests for the African American community. And I would be interested in working with business professionals on ensuring that we have a chamber to represent the business interests of our community.
Well, thank you. Mr. Byrd.
I think our business efforts are booming in Chattanooga. We have so many young African Americans who are opening up businesses. The narrative of is no African American businesses on MLK. It's no people that own businesses in Chattanooga. I can name them from CT to Lil Mamas to Blue Boys to Cleese to Mika to all types of businesses that are open. We need to stop keeping that narrative out there that we are failing and that we are failures. Economically, we can build our city and things can grow. Taxpayers' money and taxpayers' budgets are for infrastructure and for paying our city employees. And we have some left over to help with programming and things of that nature. And some people don't want their tax dollars to go through that. But we have to have our communities welcoming enough so companies will want to open up shop here in our communities. And I think that comes from just building relationships. City council or no one can force a business to open up in the city of Chattanooga. You have to have some type of bartering tools to say, hey, we want you here, or we won't get the development we have. Should we give our city away? No. But we're going to have to sit down and talk. If we wanted Michael Jordan to come to Chattanooga, I'm pretty sure Atlanta, New York, Chicago, and other places wanted Michael Jordan as well. So you have to sit down and have a sweet spot to where you can encourage these companies and businesses to come to Chattanooga. And that's how our community grow. And then with trade schools, we have to get our kids together and ready to go into their workforce once it gets here. And a lot of our kids are socially media inclined and they want to become superstars and sensations overnight with YouTube and stuff of that nature. We have to change the mindset. We're going to continue to have these conversations 20 years from now if we don't.
Appreciate that. Well, we're going to do a quick follow up to that, and remember, try to keep responses under a minute. But I think the question really getting at this long-term economic visioning and planning. So we know that there's been like a number of these broader plans, like the River to Ridge Area 3 plan. There have been a number of Chattanooga 2.0, the number of these studies and plans that have been conducted. But how do we make sure that once plans are put together, that they're actually followed through with? And how would you engage with some of these plans that have already been developed? And anyone who would like to can take a stab at it.
I think right now, I take a stab at it. Right now, the River to the Ridge plan, downtown from Amnicola to the Ridge is prime real estate. I'm saying it time and time again. If you look back through my social media page, get people to start buying property. Right now, African Americans and the droves will move out to East Brainerd and Ottawa and other places because those were considered the best places to live now, when all the Caucasian or other people are coming into town right now, buying up our properties at low numbers because the real estate is so low. And that can be due to crime, due to so many different variables, but it is what it is. But in Avondale, from the river to the ridge, that Area 3 plan has set the tone for that to be downtown. From the river to the ridge, we have to encourage our people to start buying downtown. Then we have to let them know you can buy downtown, you can buy anywhere. It's not because of redlining or other systematic systems that you're not getting the loans or things for. We have to check their credit scores. We have to check their debt to ratio income. We have to make sure that they can afford the home that they're getting. And sometimes, like we talked about, wages are not paying enough to make sure that these people and young folks can get these homes or be able to sustain these homes. And then how we do that, my whole life, I have to work 3 jobs. And sometimes you're going to have to work those 2 or 3 jobs so we can get to a safer situation. But I think that's what it is. Encourage people to buy now while it's low.
Thank you. Others?
What I would say is that I would want to go with the plans that included the community. I know that there are a lot of plans that have been developed over the history of Chattanooga, but just having a very small, closed off group develop a plan, especially for a community, and you've never consulted with that community, I think that has been part of the problem with Chattanooga, is that we've had so many plans developed without the community. One of the things that I am glad about, at least with the Area 3 plan, was there was some input. But again, I think still, even with the Area 3 plan, there were some things that were already brought to the community and then ask for input kind of after the fact. I think we need to start encouraging the community to reimagine how we develop our community and including them from the very beginning. And then utilizing that as an educational process of having people be responsible for their own communities. And so I would say I want to go along with plans that are going to have community engagement, but that are also going to encourage the community to be involved with how we reimagine the communities that we live in and develop them in the most effective way that is not going to displace African Americans, because I don't think African Americans are just leaving the city of Chattanooga. Overwhelmingly in the data, we are being displaced out of our communities from gentrification. So I want people to be able to stay in their communities. We're doing that in Oak Grove with Collier Construction. They have slated a part of the project to be for inclusionary housing. How can we do things like that further on down the line?
Appreciate that. Mr. Anderson, Mr. Holman?
Yes, and I think that building relationships is very important, and also making sure that we are understanding what support do they need to be able to continue their advocacy, important into them to include the community. I think those are the most important things, especially with us wanting to move forward and do those things with the different organization that has made plans. I think that we have to let them know that in order to make this work, we have to have input for the people that you want to buy in.
Appreciate that.
I think I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier about the job situation, but I want to go further. I want to talk about home ownership. I want to talk about fixing people's credit, fixing their background, and giving them affordable housing. Because if you've got people that have got a job that is paying a living wage to where they can live comfortably, they can invest in buying property. They can invest in starting a business. But when it seems like the odds are against them, they have no incentive. So we need to set up some incentives to help people to own their own homes and to fix their credit and to clear up their background, because a lot of the background is unsubstantiated anyway. So we want to work on that.
Appreciate that. Well, thank you all for this. We're running just a few minutes over our hour, but we have one last very important piece of this discussion. And this last piece, we have some very specific questions, and for these, we just need yes/no answers. And so you have all been sent these ahead of time, so I'll ask the question, and then we'll go through one by one. You just say yes, no, and we'll move on to the next one. So our first ask is, will you commit to develop and implement clear, enforceable, and publicly accessible criteria for the Jobs Pilot Program? We'll start with Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Mott?
Yes.
Mr. Holman?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes, yes.
Second question, will you help to ensure that City Council, relevant boards, and the general public have thorough written information outlining exactly how a proposed tax break will benefit the public? And will you ensure that this information is provided well ahead of any vote on a pilot, TIF, or other public incentive? Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Mott?
Yes.
Mr. Holman?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
All right, third one. Will you support an effort to require relevant boards and City Council to hold public hearings for respective pilot proposals well before a vote? Mr. Anderson?
Absolutely.
Ms. Mott?
Yes.
Mr. Holman?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Final question. Will you work with Caleb to help identify and set clear expectations for appointees to the IDB and the HEB boards? Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Mott?
Of course.
Mr. Holman?
Definitely.
And Mr. Byrd?
Yes. And I need an appointment right now.
All right. Excellent. Well, we thank you all so much for this incredible conversation, and thanks for your actually putting some real thought into this conversation and engaging. This is really important to us, and appreciate you being here. And with that, we're going to give each candidate just 30 seconds to close out. And so we'll start with Mr. Holman.
I'm so glad to have been able to participate in this forum, and always remember, developing relationships builds communities. I want to be your servant. Amen.
All right, Ms. Mott.
Thank you, everyone, for putting this together and the excellent work all of you guys are doing in the community. I want you to keep in mind that we are making progress. We have done good, but we can do better, and we can do better together, unified. The people united can never be defeated. Amen.
Mr. Anderson.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for putting this together. My name is DeAndre Anderson. I hope that you hear me out, give me a chance to make change, to do this together, get some new blood on the council for new, creative, innovative solutions, and I vow to work tirelessly for each and every one of my constituents.
All right, Mr. Byrd.
Yes, Chattanooga is winning. It is an amazing place to live in, and it can win for everyone. The fault that we perceive in others a lot of times don't even exist. It doesn't exist. We all are conquerors. We all are winners. Let's sit down and just make Chattanooga a better place for everyone. Let's work together, and let's just keep this dialogue going far, 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 far after this city election. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for the candidates, and thanks for folks that are joining us via Zoom, Facebook Live. As a reminder, we have 2 more City Council forums. We've got one tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock and Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. And please don't forget, early voting starts on February 10th. If you are interested in being involved with our campaign past the election, go to calebcha.org/develop with us. Thank you all so much.
Love you, Ms. Janice. Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, everyone. Y'all have a great day.
Bye, Austin. Bye, Helen. Bye, Miss Janice.
Bye, Miss Mott.
Helen.
Oh, look at you. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.